Hello friends, my name is Jess. Welcome to Books Past Bedtime. Today we're going to be doing another very exciting reading vlog. So I've had 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson in my possession for a while now, and I have really wanted to jump in and read it. It sounds so cool. It is about these murders that are happening in this town, and they all resemble famous murders from book plots. And so we've got a bookish murder on our hands, which books true crime me in a nutshell. So I have been so excited about this book, but I have been hesitant to jump into it because I know it does spoil 8 of some of the most famous thrillers and mysteries in literature, so I kind of really wanted to read those books before I jumped into this one, and so that is what we are going to be doing in this vlog. In this vlog, we're going to be reading the 8 books that inspired the 8 Perfect Murders in this book, and then at the end we will read this book. I will share the experience with you. So what are the 8 books referenced in this book, you might be wondering? Let's just go through a quick list. First of all, we have the A.B.C murders by Agatha Christie. I have never read an Agatha Christie book, so this definitely will be an experience, and I'm excited for this one. I don't know what any of these are about, so we will find out as we go about the vlog. I'm not going to do summaries here. So sorry, but that's just what's happening. So the next book on the list is Strangers on a Train by Patricia Highsmith, and then Deathtrap by Ira Levin, The Red House Mystery by A.A. Milne. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. Next, Malice Aforethought, Double Indemnity by James M. Cain, The Drowner by John D. MacDonald, and finally The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which is definitely the one I'm most excited for because it has all the dark academia vibes, and I know people really love this one. I am excited to pick it up, but also a little hesitant because it's kind of long. So the plan for this, well, sorry. Jeez, Jess, calm down. So the plan for this reading vlog is for me to read each of these books and update you as I go along. I probably will only update you once I have finished the book, just for the sake of time. I don't want to have a million updates and have this be like a 2-hour long video. So I think I'm just going to keep it short and sweet and update you at the 100% point when I'm finished with the book and let you know my thoughts. Then at the very end, we will read 8 Perfect Murders and see if I can pick up on parallels between that book and these books and see how they relate and if reading them was worth it before jumping into 8 Perfect Murders. So that is the goal of this reading vlog, and let's just get into the first book. Really quick before we start, I just wanted to throw out a quick disclaimer. I am going to be spoiling all 8 books included in this list of the 8 Perfect Murders, but I am not going to be spoiling 8 Perfect Murders itself, although I am going to be reviewing it at the end. So if you are interested in reading any of these books, I would suggest that you skip over that book when I'm talking about it. Everything is timestamped out, so that should be really easy for you to do. So the only book I really recommend separate from this list and this video concept is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. If you have not read that book and you have any interest in it, I would recommend you skipping over the part where I talk about that. But the other books on this list, they are all spoiled by 8 Perfect Murders itself, so if you're interested in reading that book, they're going to be spoiled for you anyway. But everything is timestamped down below. If you're interested in any of these, just skip right over me talking about them and continue on your merry way, and you should be good to go. So without further ado, let's just get to reading. So I finished my first Perfect Murder book, and that is Strangers on a Train by Patricia Highsmith. This book was actually written in 1950 and inspired a classic Hitchcock film of 1951 of the same name, and it definitely seems to be a classic of noir fiction, so I can really see why this book was chosen as inspiration for the 8 Perfect Murders. So this book follows our main characters, Guy and Bruno, who are complete strangers, but they meet on this train, and while Guy is a successful architect in the midst of a divorce, Bruno, on the other hand, turns out to be a sadistic psychopath who manipulates Guy into swapping murders with him. So Bruno's theory surrounding murder is that if 2 presumed complete strangers swap murders, they wouldn't be caught because there is no reason to connect either of them to the respective crimes. And so I would assume that that is the concept that is taken as inspiration for 8 Perfect Murders and will be the way one of these murders takes place in that thriller. So as you can probably tell, the premise of this book definitely sounds interesting enough, and I definitely enjoyed the noir thriller atmosphere of this story, but to me, this book was very boring. I was listening to the audiobook, and every time I put the audiobook on, I honestly fell asleep. Didn't matter what time of day it was, I fell asleep. Thankfully, I didn't listen to it while I was driving. But, so honestly, I probably missed some major plot aspects, but I really couldn't be bothered to rewind and figure out what I missed. I did a couple times, but honestly, I just did not want to read this book any longer than I had to because it was a snooze fest. Neither of the main characters were interesting. Guy is just like this buttoned up, typical man's man, and Bruno was like an alcoholic mama's boy who you really just feel more pity for than anything. So neither of these guys are interesting. Neither of the murders they commit are very very interesting. Honestly, the murders themselves are pretty unbelievable and unrealistic, and they also both happen in the first 50% of the book. So the second 50% of the book is just running out the clock, watching the guilt eat Guy alive and Bruno just become crazier. Honestly, I really think this book would have done a lot better as a short story than it could have been kept fast-paced and exciting, but as it was, this was about 200 pages too long. Overall very boring, not very exciting. I think I'm gonna give this one 2 stars. Hello, so I have read 3 books since I last talked to you. So the first of those books was the A.B.C. Murders by Agatha Christie. This is a traditional 𝗙𝗪𝗻, I don't know how to say his name, mystery. It's one of those in that series following that detective. I haven't ever read an Agatha Christie before, so I am saying that like I know what I'm talking about, but I really don't. So anyway, this book is following 𝗙𝗪𝗻, whatever his name is, as he investigates these sequential murders that are occurring around England. This murderer's MO is that he is murdering in alphabetical order. So the first person he murders has a last name that starts with A, and he murders them in a town that starts with A. And then the second person, their initials are BB, and he's murdering them in a town that starts with B, and then C, D, so on and so forth. And so 𝗙𝗪𝗻 is getting these letters from the murderer telling him, like warning him that the murders are going to happen and like where they're going to happen. I think he has some evidence and some leads, and then he's like talking to the families of the people that are getting murdered and trying to solve things that way, and it ends up being somebody in the circle that is committing the murders, which is really interesting. So overall, I enjoyed this book. I don't think Agatha Christie is really the author for me. I've tried to read her in the past, but it's just not something that really draws me in as much as I want it to. The stakes don't really feel high enough. This is kind of like just like a mystery that you read without really like engaging. I don't know what I'm saying. This was okay. I gave it 3 stars. I'm not really super keen to read another Agatha Christie anytime soon. It was just okay. So I think that the point of this being included in my reading list is that there will probably be somebody in 𝗏 Perfect Murders who like murders based on the name, like they murder alphabetically in some way. Like I'm sure that's going to be the MO of one of the murders in 𝗏 Perfect Murders. So that is the reason we read this book. It was okay. It wasn't terrible, but yeah. So the next book on my list was Deathtrap by Ira Levin. This is actually a play, and Ira Levin is actually a pretty famous author. They are the person who wrote Rosemary's Baby. I've never read that, but you know, it's like the popular movie, whatever. This play was so good. This is probably like my favorite thing I've read for this video so far. It was so good. So basically this story follows this playwright, and he's kind of washed up and old. He's had a big hit play, but he can't come up with any new ideas. And then one day, one of his students from this like workshop that he did ends up sending him this play, and he reads it and he's like, this is a great freaking idea. And the play is called Deathtrap. And so he is telling his wife, he's like, this play is so good, like I wish I had written it. And then he concocts this plan to murder this guy and steal his play and put his own name on it. So he like tricks him into coming to the house and murders him, but that all happens in the first act. So this is literally crazy. I'm gonna talk about spoilers because the point of this video is for me to read these books, so you don't have to. You can just read 𝗏 Perfect Murders. But so spoilers from here on out for this book. So he murders this playwright guy, and then in the second act, he has his wife like help him dispose of the body, yada yada yada. But then they're like enjoying a drink, being like, oh my god, what's going on? And then this guy jumps back through the window, pretends to murder the older playwright, and gives the wife a heart attack and kills the wife. And they do this because they are lovers. And they want to live together without the wife in the way. And then so the play is like not real at all, and they're like working on writing together later on. The younger playwright's like secretly writing something, and the older playwright figures out that he is actually writing the Deathtrap play based on the real events of his wife's murder. And he's like, dude, you can't publish this, like what the heck. This story is so convoluted and it's so funny, and just like when that guy came jumping back in the window and fake murdered this other guy, I was like, what? It was so wild. I mean, this is like 70 pages and all of this shit happened. It's wild. It's really good. I just spoiled it for you, but it's really good if you want to read it. I originally gave it 4 stars, but honestly I might give it 5 stars because this was freaking really good. So I would assume in 8 Perfect Murders that the purpose of including this book would be that somebody pretends to kill somebody else in order for them to come back to life and kill the other person to kill a third person. Like the goal is to kill the third person, but there's like fake out murders going on to kill the other person. I would assume that's how they're gonna kill somebody in 8 Perfect Murders. So this one was really good. My favorite so far, for sure. And then I also have read Double Indemnity by James A. Cain. This book is about this insurance salesman who meets this woman and he falls in love with her, and they decide that they are going to kill her husband in order to get him out of the way and also to cash out on the insurance claim. And so they do this. Things are kind of going haywire. The insurance company doesn't believe that this was actually an accident, and they believe that it was probably murder. And then he like ends up falling in love with this guy's daughter or something, and they like want to kill the mom. I don't know. This one was a little like twisted and weird. I ended up giving it, what did I give it? I ended up giving it 3 stars. It was okay, but it wasn't really anything special. But the way that this guy murdered the husband was that he murdered him, but then pretended to be the husband, got on a train, and then they planted the husband's body on the train track to make it look like he fell out of the train or was pushed out of the train, something like to make it look like the train killed him. So I would assume that in 8 Perfect Murders, that's what's happening. I don't know how I'm gonna keep track of all this junk, but I guess I need to write it down. So those are the 3 books I've read so far. I have 4 left. I just ordered The Secret History from Book of the Month, and then what else do I have to read? The Red House Mystery, something, I don't know. I don't remember. I'll keep you updated when I finish my next book. Hello, so I finished 2 books since I last updated you, and the first of those is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This guy is huge. This was definitely the longest book I had to read for this video, including the final one, The 8 Perfect Murders. That's actually pretty short. So I read this one. It took me not as long as I thought it might. I actually really enjoyed this one. This is basically following this group of college kids. There's 6 of them, I think. They're pretty pretentious. They study the classics up in this like private liberal arts college up in Vermont. This is like the definition of dark academia because we're following these kids in college. They're studying, doing all that kind of stuff, but there's also murder. So I think that's like the definition of dark academia, and where the whole vibe kind of came from is this book, if I'm not mistaken. So what I really liked about this one is that it was just written so well. Like you're reading this and you're like, this is literature. Like this is the definition of literature. This is amazing. This is immaculate, beautiful, wonderful, never been seen before.
Talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular.
Like you could just tell that Donna Tartt is so skilled at her craft, and she just created such an elaborate and in-depth story and explains everything to you with such beautiful like word choice and sentence structure, like literally like down to vocabulary and how she puts her paragraphs together and all that kind of stuff. Like Donna Tartt is very skilled at writing, basically. That's the gist of things. So as a result, the story was really captivating. Even though it was kind of long and it was kind of boring in parts, just the strength of her writing really made up for any faults that I could find in this book. And so I really enjoyed it. I really came to know the characters. I thought the plot was super interesting. It kept me engaged the whole time. I'm going to settle on a 4-star rating, just because this probably isn't going to be an all-time favorite. I did really enjoy it for what it was, but at the same time, it is a little pretentious. It is a little long, and for those reasons, it's just like not a 5-star for me. So like the murder plot in this that I think is going to be incorporated into 8 Perfect Murders. So in the beginning, 4 of the people in this group, they're kind of trying to do this, like, I literally have no idea how to say this word, but I will put it on the screen. And the purpose of this is like to take psychedelics and like ascend to this higher state of mind. While these people are doing this, they end up like killing somebody, murdering him in cold blood. They don't know who it is. It's a stranger. And then they are like trying to hush this up. And the other 2 people in this group find out, but one of them, whose name is Bunny, he kind of is always joking about turning them in and telling on them, and it's not so much that he has a moral quandary with the murder, it's that he is upset that he was left out. So he's kind of a loose cannon, and they're kind of trying to do everything in their power to keep him happy, to keep him satisfied, to keep him from not telling on them. And he just becomes so erratic that they are like, the only way that we're going to keep this quiet is if we murder Bunny also. So they push Bunny off a cliff and are done with him, but then everything just spirals out of control and everybody is like plagued with guilt and paranoia and all of this stuff. So I'm not really quite sure what they're going to incorporate in 8 Perfect Murders. I don't know if they're going to like just take the first one and like killing them during this weird cult ritual, or if they're going to incorporate the second one as well, in that you kill somebody to quiet up another crime that you committed. So I think this is kind of a toss-up. I feel like, I don't really know, but those are the elements. That's the murder. So something of that is going to be incorporated in 8 Perfect Murders, and we will see how that turns out. So then the other book I finished was The Red House Mystery. Is that what it's called? I literally don't even know. But it's by A.L. Milne, who is also the person who wrote Winnie the Pooh. So a weird kind of contrast in his repertoire here, but he said that his father really liked murder mysteries, so that's why he wrote this one for his family and for his dad. This book was really boring. I really did not enjoy this one. It's really short, but it honestly took me forever to read. It took me like multiple days to read this 150-page story because I just was so freaking bored. So it's basically following our main character, Anthony, who just kind of happens upon this murder. He is going to this house to see his friend. His friend's not in, but the like men of the house are in, and somebody just got killed. And like he goes in and sees that this person has been killed and starts to like investigate what actually happened because there's all kinds of mystery surrounding this death. The guy that owns the house, his name is Mark. Mark is missing. The guy in the study that's dead, his name is Robert, and he is Mark's brother. And then Kaylee, who is like the cousin of these two people and also lives in the house, is the one that was in the house when Anthony came and found the guy dead and found all this stuff happening. Anthony basically just like solves the murder. It turns out that Robert was never alive, was never in the house. Kaylee staged Mark's death. So even though they thought Robert was dead, it was actually his brother Mark that was dead. And Mark wasn't missing at all. He was there dead the whole time. Don't know how nobody else recognized this, but apparently he shaved and then nobody knew that it was him. I don't know. Honestly, this book was so boring and kind of dumb, and main character Anthony was so annoying. His friend Bill that he came to see, he just was like putting him down the whole time and acting so superior to him, and it's just really annoying. He was just annoying and awful. So I did not like reading from his perspective, and yeah, this book was just fucking boring. So I guess the murder that's going to be in 8 Perfect Murders is that they're gonna think one person is dead, but it's actually gonna be somebody else that's dead or something. And Kaylee like organized this because Mark and Kaylee were after the same girl, so he wanted him dead and out of the way. So he tried to kill him. And like the genius of it was that he had everybody convinced that it wasn't Mark that was dead and Mark was the one that was missing, and Mark was the one that actually committed the murder. And so Kaylee was like gonna get off scot-free, but Anthony figured him out. So those are the 2 books I've finished since I last updated you. I have 2 more left to read. I have to read Malice Aforethought and also I already read Double Indemnity. Oh, The Drowner is the other one I have to read. I'm not really looking forward to it. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm running out of steam a little bit, but I'm doing this for you, so you don't have to read these books. So yeah, I have those 2 left to read, and then obviously we have to read 8 Perfect Murders at the end and see how these all tie together and if my predictions were correct. I mean, and they're not really predictions because I'm just telling you like what the genius murder was in all of these books. So we'll see how everything ties together and ties into that story. So yeah, I will just update you next when I have something to update you about. It is rainy and gloomy outside, so I'm sorry if the lighting sucks. Also, I'm sorry if you can hear the rain and it bothers you, but I think it's kind of soothing, so hopefully you do too. I'm sorry. So I finally finished the last 2 of my 8 book list, and I am going to tell you about them. First one I finished was The Drowner by John MacDonald, I believe. This book was terrible. I hated this book, unfortunately. It was really boring. It was only about 150 pages, but it literally felt like I was reading a 600-page book. It took me so long to get through this because it was boring. Now, I will admit that the murder in it is pretty genius. So it's called The Drowner because our murderer like dives down in a pond with like scuba gear, knowing that the person she wants to kill is going to come swim there, and then she just like pulls her legs down and drowns her. And so it looks like a suicide. It doesn't look like it was even a murder at all. So like I can see why it ended up on this list. A pretty ingenious murder. She also murders somebody else though by like making her hand really stiff and like shoving it up under his ribs and squeezing his heart until it stops. Not sure how she got away with that one, but they thought he had a car wreck and a heart attack. I don't know. That one was really strange and kind of stupid for frankly. But one of my biggest problems in this book was mostly how women were described. Women were either disgustingly, atrociously ugly, or they were beautiful and seductresses. Gross. This was written in like the 1920s or the 1930s, so things like that slid a little bit more easily in books, but that doesn't mean I like reading them now. This book, from me, it's getting 1 star. I did not enjoy my reading experience of this one at all. And then the next book I finished was Malice Aforethought by Frances Ilse, and this book is actually pretty famous. It was written in the 1930s as well, and it was one of the first inverted murder mysteries, which means that we know the killer and the victim from the very first page of the story, even though the actual murder hasn't taken place yet. And then the purpose of the mystery is to like work backwards and figure out the motive. This book was probably included on the list because the murder is pretty ingenious. The husband actually ends up murdering his wife, but he makes it look like a drug overdose. He slowly gets her addicted to morphine, and he like makes it obvious around town that she is addicted and that she's like forging a signature to get more morphine because he's a doctor, and that she's administering it to herself when he's not aware, and all of this stuff. So when he finally administers her a lethal dose of morphine and kills her, everybody will just think it's an accidental overdose, and that is kind of what happens. This obviously spirals out of control. He ends up murdering other people, and we kind of see his like descent into guilt and like obsession with getting rid of all the people that negatively impact his life, even though he is the only one negatively impacting his life because he is an absolute idiot. He is insufferable. I hated reading about him. He was a very bad protagonist. This book also suffered from the problem of objectifying and describing women in icky terms, so we didn't like that. Women were just kind of seen as like hysterical or like stupid, unintelligent, annoying, getting in the way, not being understanding, all of this, all the negative stereotypes about women in that day and age, I guess. And once again, I was not a fan. The ending of this book was honestly really stupid. Like in a way it was kind of funny, but at the same time it was dumb and kind of a letdown. I am going to be spoiling this little part. I already spoiled the murder, so it probably doesn't matter, but he ends up like attempting to murder 2 other people, his previous mistress and his previous mistress's husband. He fails at doing this, but he accidentally gets another person that was over at tea sick with a disease he didn't want them to get sick with. Like he wasn't trying to kill this other person. This other person ends up dying. They can't convict him on the murders that he actually had Malice Aforethought for, but he does get convicted and hanged for this random person that he accidentally killed incidentally. So I mean, at least he gets his comeuppance, I guess, but it's kind of like a letdown in terms of justice because it wasn't really appropriately served. I don't know, stupid. This book was kind of stupid, to be honest with you, and it was annoying. It was also a slog to get through, and I'm also rating this one 1 star. Whoops. Okay, so before I talk to you about 8 Perfect Murders, I want to kind of wrap up all of these 8 books that I read. So I am going to just go ahead and rank them because I think that will be the easiest way for me to talk about them. So first on my list is definitely The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I gave this one 4 stars, but I did really enjoy it. I think it was super well written, super interesting, and it's one that I would definitely recommend you read just because I think it is a good story and I think you would really enjoy it. My next favorite was Deathtrap by Ira Levin. I also rated this one 4 stars. The Secret History and Deathtrap were both ones that could have been like a 4.5 stars. I did really enjoy both of them. Deathtrap in particular was just super funny, super ridiculous, and just a fun time, and it's a play. It was really quick and short. It took me like maybe an hour to read, and if you can get your hands on it, I actually really enjoyed this one and would recommend you read this one as well. Now, the other 6, I could take or leave, personally. The next one that I would probably talk about is the A.B.C. Murders by Agatha Christie. I definitely think this one is worth reading if you're a Christie fan. I personally am not really a fan of just straight up mysteries. I like more thrilling aspects in my mystery thrillers, so I did find this one to be a little bit boring. I rated it 3 stars, but it's definitely worth the read if you are interested in it, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not my personal taste. Then next, I would probably actually rate Strangers on a Train by Patricia Highsmith. I just thought this was kind of ingenious and different than anything else I've read. I didn't really enjoy it that much. I gave it like 2.5 stars maybe. I don't even remember what I rated it. I read it so long ago. It was overall kind of boring, but I think the concept behind it was pretty cool, and definitely see why it was included on this list. Next, I would probably put Double Indemnity by James A. Cain, I believe is who wrote this one. This one I also gave like 3 stars, 2.5 stars. It wasn't that good. It was also kind of boring, but I think that this one did like drama and like messy relationships better than the other ones. At the end, it kind of like veered off the tracks a little bit, pardon my pun, because there's a train in this one as well, but there was like some weird like predatory underage stuff going on at the end that I didn't like, but like the original murder, like to kill your mistress's husband because you want his insurance check and you want to be with his wife, it's like kind of funny and kind of messy, and I was kind of here for that. But then the second half verged into weird territory, so this is like a 2.5 star maybe. Next is The Red House Mystery by A.A. Milne. This one was boring. I've said this before. I think this is probably 2 stars. There was really nothing wrong with this one. It was kind of ingenious. I didn't see the twist coming, but it was just boring to slog through. And then at the very bottom of my list are the 2 books that I just talked about. I think the next to last is going to be Malice Aforethought. Like I said, this one was boring, but it wasn't quite as offensive to me as The Drowner was, which is the absolute last book on this list. This book to me was not only boring, but also offensive, even though Malice Aforethought also described women weird, and honestly all of these books, except for maybe The Secret History, kind of described women a little strangely. The Drowner is the only one where they were like overly sexualized to like a very weird place. So The Drowner is definitely my least favorite of all of these books, but that is my ranking. Yeah, like I said before, the only ones that I would recommend independent of 8 Perfect Murders are The Secret History and Deathtrap. I am glad that I read those 2. Deathtrap was one I definitely wouldn't have read without this experiment, so I am glad to have read that and to have found that because I really did think it was really funny. So those are the books that 8 Perfect Murders is based on, and now I am going to go read 8 Perfect Murders itself. Okay, so I have finished the 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. I'm sorry I didn't give updates throughout, but I was really behind on this video honestly and just wanted to get it up, so I just went ahead and read the whole book, and we are going to wrap it up and review it now. So overall, I did like this book. I didn't absolutely love it though. I was kind of disappointed. I don't know if it's because I've been filming this video for so long and reading all of these books that I kind of was tired of it and just wanted to be done, but I do think a little bit more went into it than that. This wasn't the best written book that I've ever read in my life. It didn't have a lot of nuance to it. It was kind of like trying to be literary, but it didn't succeed. The writing was honestly pretty straightforward, sometimes in ways that felt info dumpy, and I don't usually feel like I'm getting info dumped on in a thriller, so that was kind of weird. And I think that was because it was explaining all the plots to the 8 Perfect Murder books in this book, and so every time we would encounter a new book, they would explain in detail why it was on this list of 8 Perfect Murders and how it connected to what was going on in the story, and that got a bit much, and maybe that's because I had already read all of these, so I would have gotten the references without the explanation, but at the same time it felt like a lot, and a lot of times it would feel unnatural to the storyline. Like sometimes the characters would explain the books in the dialogue and they'll be like, oh, what happened in that one again? It just was like lazy writing kind of in a way, because I always think there's better ways to incorporate things like that into your story instead of just like very obviously having the character blatantly ask what the book was about. It's just like the most basic plot device, writing device in the world, and it was kind of exhausting to read about it 8 different times. So one thing that bothered me was the writing. There was another weird thing where the narrator would every once in a while address the reader. They would be like, you probably know this and you probably know that. And it was really jarring and it really threw me out of the story. I didn't really like that. The whole gimmick behind this book though is that it's written as a memoir, and our main character is writing it, and it's like a true story and they're writing it like to somebody to read. So I get why they did it, and I liked in the beginning where it was like, this is a memoir, blah blah blah, because it makes it feel more real and kind of more creepy. But in the middle of the book and in middle of chapters when they would address the main character, use second person, I wasn't really a fan of that. I thought it was kind of weird and it broke the flow of the story. One good thing about this book though is I do think that it is really a great book for people who love books. Like the main character loves books. He loves crime books in particular and murder mysteries, and he works in a bookstore, and you just really do get the sense that this is a book for book lovers, and I always love that. I feel like that's a prompt in readathons a lot too, so if you're looking for a book about books, this definitely would work and was so fun for that reason. I mentioned this a little bit when I was talking about the books I read leading up to this book, but I definitely prefer more thriller aspects to my mystery thrillers than mystery aspects, and this definitely was heavy on the mystery. It really wasn't very thrilling. It didn't really feel very high stakes like I wanted it to. The last like 30 pages probably felt pretty high stakes, but the rest of it was just kind of like a really long, really drawn out feeling exposition, and I just wanted it to be a little bit more fast paced, but that's something that's personal preference to me. But this is definitely a book that's a little bit mystery heavy. I also just wasn't really a fan of the narrator. You probably could guess that from me talking about it a little bit. I think it had a lot to do with the writing and stuff, but honestly the narrator was so full of himself and he made a lot of really stupid decisions, like telling people things that he shouldn't and just being like too confident that people wouldn't figure things out in the same way that he was figuring things out, and he just was kind of exhausting to read from at some points because I just was rolling my eyes at him like, you're an idiot. So overall I liked aspects of this book, but it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. I think I'm gonna rate it like a solid 3.5 stars. It definitely is worth the read if you're interested in it. I definitely thought it was good. but it just wasn't like my ideal thriller, so I couldn't really rate it higher than that, if you know what I mean. So let's talk about the purpose of this video. Did I need to read all of the 8 books on the 8 Perfect Murders list in order to have a full experience? And I am going to answer that question with no. This book very obviously and very thoroughly explains and spoils all of the stories that are referenced in this book, so you really don't have to have read them before you go into it. You can fully get the story and the concept of the story without having that background. If anything, that background possibly hurt my enjoyment of this book because I just kind of wanted the references to be more nuanced, but instead they were very blatantly explained, which, having read the books, I didn't need, so then it felt like I was slogging through those descriptions. But if you haven't read the books, it would be perfectly fine and make complete sense, and I understand why he had to do that, but at the same time, like, I thought it would have been more fun to have read those books and then like get references that the average reader probably wouldn't, but the average reader is going to get every reference in this book, having read these books or not, regardless. I am not in some secret club having already read all of these books, unfortunately, but that's okay. But again, this does spoil all of those books mentioned, so if you are interested in any of the books on this list, I definitely would implore you to read them before reading this book, because it does completely spoil everything about them. And the books that I would definitely recommend you checking out before you read this one are The Secret History by Donna Tartt, as well as Deathtrap by Ira Levin. I also recommend, if you're a Christie fan, that you read the A.B.C. Murders by Agatha Christie. I think a lot of people consider it one of her best, and it is spoiled in here, so it would be fun to read it before you read this one. Also, another thing that I think is good to know before you go into this book is that it also spoils another book that is not on the 8 Perfect Murders list. So it also spoils another Agatha Christie book called The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, and this book it like blatantly spoils as well, and it kind of is used as like the archetype, the connecting thread through this whole story, and it's kind of like the main character's story. That's one I actually wish that I had known was in this book, because I think that would have been one of the most interesting ones to read, to like get the references better, because I think the references for that book were the most like subtle. I mean, the plot of the book was still obviously explained, and the point in including it was obviously explained, but at the same time, like, I think I probably would have seen more parallels between the main character of that book and the narrator if I had read that book first. So honestly, I would recommend, if you are interested in this book, maybe reading that one first and seeing if you do see more parallels. I haven't read it, so I couldn't tell you how similar it is, but I do think that was interesting, and I wish I had known before I did this experiment, because I would have read that one too. So, as a conclusion, I would not recommend reading all 8 of these books before you pick up 8 Perfect Murders. If you are really excited to pick up 8 Perfect Murders, you should just go ahead and do it, unless you are a completionist like I am. I personally am glad that I checked all of these out. I feel like I have a better understanding of like the original crime fiction genre, and I am a completionist, so I am happy to have read all of these books before I read this one, just in case that down the road I for some reason wanted to read these and I had already been spoiled, and then I would be upset. Definitely am glad I read The Secret History. Definitely am glad that it introduced me to Deathtrap. But yeah, I would say if you're interested in 8 Perfect Murders, just read 8 Perfect Murders, because everything is explained, you will get all the references, and you will have a great time hopefully reading it. So that is my reading vlog for today. Let me know in the comments how crazy I am for doing this experiment. I hope you really enjoyed watching this video. It definitely was fun to make, and I definitely am glad that I did it, because I feel like if I had read this book without reading the other 8 books, I would have been wondering the whole time if I was missing out on something, and now I know that I probably wouldn't have been, so it's better to know, I guess, than to wonder. And since I put myself through this, now you don't have to. You can just read the book in peace and be cool with it. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. All relevant links are in the description down below. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment on this video. Also follow me on Instagram if you're interested in my day-to-day reading. I'm very active over there. Yeah, thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.